Hello, I'm James Holland and I'm a historian of the Second World War. History Hit is a bit like Netflix, but purely for history. We've got hundreds of hours of historical documentaries going all the way back to classical times, right through to the Cold War and beyond. Use the word war stories, all one word, for a massive discount when you join up.
He was a sadistic murderer.
He was called the Hangman of Riga.
My God, this is a Nazi criminal. What is he doing here? This is something that the state of Israel could not tolerate.
The plan is like the best spy novel.
Gather all possible intelligence about him, befriend him, and kill him.
Summer 1964, Brazil. Latvian Nazi Herbert Cukurs is living quietly in Sao Paulo. For the man known as the Hangman of Riga, it is a peaceful life, but all that is about to change.
Cukurs was photographed in Brazil by someone from the Jewish population. They have heard of him, and they know who he is. Cukurs was involved in some of the most vile crimes of the Second World War.
Cukurs, together with the Latvian Nazis, killed thousands of innocent people, children and elder people and women.
And there's a lot of testimony, which I've read in archives from after the war, in which Cukurs, the name keeps coming up.
The photos of Cukurs travel halfway around the world to a special Nazi hunting unit within Israel's Secret Service. They kick off one of the most daring missions in the Mossad's history.
September 1st, 1964, a Mossad agent is called to a meeting in an operational apartment in Paris. His commander tells him, "We have a very special mission for you. We want to send you to South America to find for us a Nazi called Cukurs." He tells him, "Your name from today onward is Anton Kunzle."
He told me that Cukurs was living in Brazil.
Cukurs was an officer in the Latvian Air Force before the war.
Mid-1941, Hitler invades Latvia. Then Cukurs joins up with a gang of murderers and cutthroats. They went around following Nazi orders to go and commit atrocities on the Jews in Riga, capital of Latvia.
They saw him personally snatching babies from the arms of the mothers and killing them. They burned the synagogue with 300 people in it and didn't let anybody run out.
He told me that Cukurs was responsible for the extermination of 30,000 Latvian Jews. Thinking of my parents, who both died in the Holocaust, I agreed immediately.
Anton Kunzle was the perfect choice for this kind of operation. First of all, because of his background. Kunzle grew up in Germany when the Nazis came to power. German was his mother tongue. He was part of the team that kidnapped Eichmann 4 years earlier.
Unlike a desk murderer such as Adolf Eichmann, Cukurs literally had blood on his hands. And they think, what are we going to do? Are we going to do another Eichmann? Are we going to kidnap him? Conduct a trial? Or are we going to do something quite different?
They decided this time not to kidnap him and not to put him on trial, but to execute him and have the public reaction to it.
The plan: Kunzle will befriend Cukurs and lure him out of Brazil. Assassinating him on Brazilian soil is risky. There could be retaliation against the large Jewish population. If Kunzle is caught, he could be executed.
We called him the deceased from the beginning. We were confident the mission will succeed.
They wanted to make Nazis all over the world fear of their life.
Despite the danger, the Mossad agent has one condition.
I asked to go only alone. No squad to watch about me. If it was discovered that somebody was guarding me, it might be my end.
But to work alone, he needs a cover story.
I became an Austrian businessman, Anton Kunzle, who was a former Nazi, who intended to develop tourism to Brazil. I started growing a mustache. I went to a tailor and ordered a summer black suit. At the oculist, I faked the result of my examination so that I could get prescription glasses. If my glasses would have been fake, Cukurs might have suspicions.
Kunzle looks like your classic, anonymous, Western European guy. He's sort of balding, he's got a moustache, he's got glasses, he's a little bit tubby. If you walk past him in the street, you wouldn't remember him. And he's the perfect spy.
My bald head and my belly are the means which make me trusted to everybody I meet.
He gets a new passport, and then he goes around Europe creating this completely new identity.
He printed business cards. He ordered special and expensive stationery.
He relied on that absence of global communication to get every piece of paperwork he needed. Everything is like something out of a real vintage thriller.
Armed with a new identity, the Mossad spy begins the next phase of his assignment, the hunt for the Hangman of Riga.
I booked a ticket to Rio de Janeiro. I intended first to stop at Rio de Janeiro to know what Brazil is like, and then to advance to Sao Paulo, close to the objective.
He toured around a couple of days to establish his cover story, tried to build up some contact to the local tourist industry.
I told them that I were interested in investments, and they gave me recommendations to Sao Paulo. I got their personal cards, names and their addresses. I left signs in every corner to assure my identity.
When Anton Kunzle was given the mission of finding Cukurs, he really felt that he's doing a holy mission. His mother was killed in Auschwitz. His father died in concentration camp of Theresienstadt.
I feel a certain debt to my parents.
But the mission isn't just about revenge. Many European countries are about to formally declare that the time for prosecuting Nazi war crimes is over. Israel will never accept this.
Even though 20 years have passed, some people don't forget.
After a week in Rio, Kunzle moves to Sao Paulo and his target, Herbert Cukurs.
I went to the place where Cukurs was. I saw him.
Cukurs at the time was renting boats, and also he was running a plane service.
He flew little seaplanes, and he would give people tours of Sao Paulo.
Cukurs is living in Brazil for the last 20 years.
Like many high-ranking Nazis, after the war, Cukurs escaped to Brazil. The Brazilian government is fanatically anti-communist and turns a blind eye. Kunzle knows if he is caught, they will be far less sympathetic to an Israeli spy.
Kunzle understood that this is something never done before in the Mossad, because he was sent to Brazil without a backup team, and he was working solo by himself in order to approach Cukurs, gain his confidence, and eventually bring his death.
He seemed very strong, quite physically fit. I would have to take this into account. I decided to return when I was sure I was ready.
"48 hours after sighting his target, Agent Kunzle returns to the marina, this time to meet with Herbert Cukurs.
I decided to hire him for sightseeing flight over São Paulo.
Cukurs is a very good pilot. In the 30s, he was a national hero in Latvia because he built an airplane, flew from Riga to Gambia in West Africa. Non-stop flight.
Cukurs was indeed the Latvian Limburg, the most famous man of daring do in Latvia and that part of the world at the time.
After the flight, the Latvian Nazi invites the Israeli spy for a drink.
He took me to his captain's cabin. I saw a gunner on his boat. I got tense because for Cukurs there was no problem to murder.
Anton Kunzle started telling Cukurs that he's a businessman, showing him he has money, he has connections.
Cukurs sees Kunzle's obviously a man seemingly of great wealth. Cukurs, on the other hand, has made very, very little money running his flying boat hire pleasure flight business. But he lived extremely modestly and he had financially a very, very tough time.
I told him that I had come to invest capital in South America and tourist business. You are connected to it. It would interest me to talk to you.
And that's his way of tugging at Cukurs' greed. Cukurs admits quite quickly to Kunzle that he has this incredibly dark past.
He said, you know, they say I am a war criminal.
His remark that I'm a Nazi criminal could be a way of testing to see who is the guy in front of him. And Kunzle showed no, he didn't react, you know. He said, okay, so people say you are a Nazi criminal, I mean, okay. He asked Kunzle, what were you doing during the war?
I knew he was a captain. In this case, I decided I was a little lower, so I made myself a lieutenant.
And he said, and I also was wounded on the Eastern Front. And Cukurs said, really?
I opened my shirt where I had an operation in Tel Aviv hospital, and I said I got wounded on the Russian front.
He had some sort of mole or something removed. And of course he claimed this was some sort of wound that he had received. And of course all this helped build up the story that he had indeed been a serving officer of the fatherland. And Cukurs started to believe it all.
He said, you know, why don't you come to see me during the week in my home? I said, I don't know when I shall come back.
Kunzle knows in order to get his man, he doesn't want to, like the suitor at a disco, go in straight away and lay his intentions straight up. So he plays the long game.
I wanted to let him boil in his oil. Not so quick. Chi va piano, va lontano, va sano. Who goes slow, goes far, and goes safe.
Kunzle went back to the hotel and he sent a message back to headquarters in Tel Aviv.
It was in secret ink.
The message said, "The fish has swallowed the bait."
I left him in doubt, and after a week or so, came back.
Cukurs invites Kunzle to have dinner with his family. He lived in a house which looked like a fortress. It's a fortified house with barbed wires around and dogs and searchlights. It was defined enough to show him, look, I'm well protected. It's really going into the lion's lair. No backup team, no protection. If the family is suspicious that he's maybe a Mossad agent, they can kill him, throw away his body, nobody will know about it.
I meet his wife, his son.
Cukurs shows him his medals from the war. He showed him his collection of guns, handguns, a Mauser, a Beretta, different calibers.
I thought it might be a warning.
He thought, I like you, but be sure to know that I know how to protect myself.
Cukurs wants to always make out that he's the big man. And at the same time as Kunzle's trying to subtly impress Cukurs, Cukurs is not so subtle in the way he tries to impress Kunzle. So he tries to make out, I'd be a good business partner for you, and he claims he has this plantation outside town.
He took me close to the jungle.
It's quite a long drive. And obviously, people will need a little rest break. Kunzle suddenly realizes, because he's circumcised, this could be a problem if Cukurs sees this when they urinate on the side of the road. Kunzle was very cunning about it, and he worked out that if Cukurs actually had seen his penis and inquired as to why it lacked a foreskin, he was going to say, well, I caught gonorrhea in a military brothel on the Russian front, and one of the forms of treatment was to be circumcised.
At the plantation, the stakes are suddenly raised.
Cukurs says, hey, I want to have a little shooting match, a little competition with you.
He had a sporting rifle with him. I thought it might be my end.
Could Cukurs have been more cunning than him? Could he have lured him up to the banana plantation to kill him? So they set up a target. Cukurs shoots first. And he gets a very nice grouping. And Kunzle goes, well, it's the type of practice Cukurs got from shooting Jews running away from him on the streets of Riga. Kunzle then is given the rifle.
And said, do you still know how to shoot? I said, yes.
Cukurs didn't know that Anton was a real marksman.
I was the first in Israel to volunteer for the British Army.
Kunzle made 5 or 6 beautiful shots.
He shoots within a 3-centimeter grouping. It's like that classic moment between two men and one has got the better one than the other.
So he said, you're all right.
Cukurs admits that Kunzle is the better shot. It's a key moment in the hunt. And it occurs to Kunzle, well, I could just do the job now.
I shoot Cukurs, hide his body. Mission accomplished. Nobody will know.
I decided not to execute it. I was afraid I might be discovered.
In Brazil at the time, there was still capital punishment. Imagine to yourself a Jewish Mossad agent being hanged because he was trying to execute a Nazi.
Cukurs suddenly accepts that Kunzle probably is what he says he is.
He started to call him Herr Anton in order to say, I understand you are the boss. Psychologically, it strengthened Cukurs' confidence.
Over the following weeks, the Israeli spy gets closer to the marked man.
He takes him for a round of nightlife, glamour.
He notices Cukurs is very in control. He nurses his drinks, and he's very nervous about those around him. And at one point, he even suspects one of the waiters, I think, of being Jewish, and thinks that maybe this guy is following him.
He was very, very wary of anybody trying to approach him because he knew, of course, that Eichmann was kidnapped by the Mossad. And at the time, there were stories that the Mossad is hunting Nazis all over the world.
Cukurs is borderline paranoid.
Anton Kunzle continued all the time slowly to implant the seeds of trust in Cukurs' mind. A sentence here, a sentence there about his financial abilities and his companies.
The moment I am in action, I am very cool. I was confident. Cukurs trusted me.
He keeps feeding Cukurs little tidbits that we maybe will set up some company here to do this. Maybe you could get involved, Herbert, me old friend. But Kunzle can tell that there is that suspicion there. So he's very careful not to promise him too much.
And Cukurs is getting greedier and greedier.
The ka-ching sound is going in his head. He's thinking there's some cash here.
Maybe this Mr. Kunzle is his way out of lower income class to the world that Cukurs believes he should belong to, like his heydays in the Second World War.
On the first day of the occupation, I was 16 years old. And there was a knock at the door, and there was Herbert Cukurs. And they said, "You're a Jew, you get outside, doesn't matter what you were." That's the last time I saw her dad. And that was the beginning of the end. Cukurs came in and threw us out of my apartment. He took all our belongings. They built a ghetto in the outskirts of town. Bob wired it, called the Riga ghetto, where they shoved us into the ghetto, and I kissed my mom goodbye for the last time. The next morning, they were gone.
The Jews were driven out of the ghetto at Riga by Cukurs and his men to the forest where tens of thousands of people were murdered. 3 people survived, and luckily we have the testimony of some of those. He wouldn't just shoot adults, he would shoot children in front of their parents. And there are testimonies which has him shooting a baby in front of its mother.
Within 4 months, I lost my mother and father. My entire family was wiped out. They were killed in the mass graves. You could hear screaming and hollering. The children were hollering, the women was crying. We could actually hear the guns. Later on, Cukurs occupied my apartment. And at nighttime, he would have me come upstairs to my own apartment and play the piano while he was entertaining his girlfriends. I could hear Cukurs laughing and drinking and having fun, and there I am sitting and playing. It was horrible. Even though I survived, it's something I can never get over.
The Israeli spy spends more and more time with the Latvian Nazi. They scout for new investments. They plan future businesses.
Kunzle realizes after many more meetings with Cukurs that things are going extremely well. And he realizes that things are now getting into place in order to actually perform the final part of the mission, i.e. the execution.
3 weeks after their first meeting, Kunzle tells Cukurs he has to return to Europe to take care of business.
I said, I shall send you a telegram, and I left for Europe. I left him hoping he would be again a rich and important person.
But when Anton Kunzle returns to South America, he will not be alone. In Europe, Anton Kunzle plans the next phase of his operation against Nazi Herbert Cukurs.
Kunzle goes back to Paris where he discusses with his fellow agents what's the best place to kill him.
We decided that if we shall execute him, it would not be in Brazil, but in Uruguay.
There's a big, big Jewish community in Brazil. And if this is seen as Jews killing a Nazi, then there's going to be a backlash against the Jewish population.
Uruguay was more democratic than Brazil at the time. A very small Jewish minority. It wouldn't cause such a repercussion. And also important, no capital punishment.
Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, they decide that's the best place.
They decide to lure him into an isolated place. Someone from the team would read to him a charge that he was personally responsible for the murder of 30,000 Jews of Riga and execute him on the spot.
He's a very, very big, solid guy. And you see pictures of him, and he's got forearms the size of, a boxer's. He's a fearsome proposition.
They were expecting to have some kind of a fight. A hit team is built up. 4 Mossad people. They are given course in man-to-man combat.
They spend a lot of time practicing their karate moves and how to do their martial arts.
The hit squad is primed. The balding spy sends the Hangman of Riga a letter urging him to come to Montevideo. As an incentive, he includes a check for plane tickets and expenses.
Kunzle decides, I can say that we have a business opportunity we want to explore there. We're a big business, we can do this. Cukurs is reluctant because he's very worried about leaving the country. He feels threatened, he feels unsafe because he won't have the protection of his friends and family around. He was always suspicious.
But for the impoverished Nazi, the money proves irresistible.
Cukurs had no passport, so he had to file for a Brazilian passport. And Kunzle helps him with background letters and documents saying that he's employing him as his associate.
A week later, Cukurs sends a telegram to Kunzle, confirming he'll meet him in Montevideo. The trap is set.
The team of Mossad agents fly out, and they fly into different places at different times, but they all meet in Montevideo in order to plan the next part of this mission. And it was very hard for the agents to find the property they needed in which they could kill him. But eventually they found up this little suburban area, part of Montevideo, what seemed like the perfect property. It was a one-story house. In the neighbouring property, there were builders working. Murdering people can tend to make quite a lot of noise, and clearly having a load of builders next door was not going to be helpful. But time was tight, so they thought it'll just have to do.
All that's missing is the target. To ensure Cukurs doesn't back out, Kunzle decides to meet him in Sao Paulo and travel with him to Montevideo.
And at Sao Paulo, he steps off the plane, and there's Cukurs, ready to greet him. Cukurs has a Super 8 camera, and he's filming him.
When I stepped down from the plane, he stood in front of me and took my picture. I tried to cover my face.
And Kunzle, of course, is absolutely appalled by this because, like any good spy, he doesn't want to be photographed. He then says to Cukurs, "Hello, Herbert, have you got all your papers to go to Uruguay?" Cukurs goes, "No, I haven't got them yet. Haven't sort of got round to it."
I sharply spoke to him and said, if you want business with me, never do this again. Never send me a telegram, you are ready and you're not ready.
Kunzle decides, I need to behave like this man's boss. And it's a great bit of bluff because it works completely.
I went on, I say, you send me a telegram to Montevideo, to my hotel. In the meantime, that he prepare visas.
Cukurs eventually gets the paperwork sorted out.
Cukurs get his passport and then he can fly to Montevideo to meet his good business associate, Mr. Anton Kunzle.
Before he leaves, Cukurs does something odd. He gives his wife the Super 8 film he took of Kunzle at the airport.
Was it because he just wanted, to have some footage of a short, balding, moustached man? No. Cukurs had this cunning. He was always suspicious of Kunzle.
Cukurs told his wife, if anything happens to me, this is the man who is responsible.
Five months after the Mossad mission was launched, the Latvian Nazi sends word he's flying to Montevideo. He meets the Israeli assassin at his hotel.
They check in into the very expensive hotel, which is also part of the plan, to calm down Cukurs, to show him that everything is going according to plan. From the beginning, Cukurs had a dual feeling towards Kunzle. On one hand, he saw it as a chancy encounter with an Austrian ex-officer in the Wehrmacht who is a businessman and is promising all kind of good things for the future. On the other hand, Cukurs was a very clever person. He was alert all the time. He knew that after the war, he will have to pay for his crimes. He knew that he is not innocent. He was very suspicious.
Cukurs is still greedy for money, and even though he's got suspicions about Kunzle, he's going to go along with it because he's desperate for the cash. So he says to Cukurs, look, I really need your advice to help me find a new sort of business premises, a satellite office. So could you help me come and have a look round a few potential buildings we could use as offices? So the two men do a lot of driving around in a VW Beetle, looking at various premises. It's a way of trying to make Cukurs just feel a bit more relaxed.
After going around Montevideo for a while, Anton Kunzle tells Cukurs, I want to show you another place. This is his last ride to the villa where they're going to execute him. Anton Kunzle needed to signal the team that everything is going according to plan.
I left the car without enough petrol. I stopped at a certain petrol station.
Another member of the team is waiting on the other side of the road. He signaled him that everything is okay.
The lookout alerts the hit squad to meet at the house.
They took off their clothes because they were expecting to have some kind of a fight. They knew it will not pass without violent reaction from Cukurs. Things could be very messy and very bloody. Kunzle walks first, to show that he's the boss.
If I open the door and say, go in, he will not. If I go in, he will come after me.
And he's thinking, I can't hear him behind me. Is he going to follow me? Is he suspicious? Is this the moment where suddenly Cukurs runs up to me and just hits me in the back of the head and that's me gone? And eventually he hears footsteps. And Cukurs is walking up behind him and he thinks it's going to happen.
He opens the door, walks in.
And suddenly, the agents jump on it. Cukurs is fighting for his life.
He managed to rush through the door.
And the most horrendous fight takes place.
One jumped him and immediately threw him down.
He fought like a lion.
All these young Mossad agents were all being, held off by Cukurs.
Cukurs reached to his own gun.
A hammer is produced. Cukurs pretty much crumples, but he's not dead.
He started shouting, "Lasst mich sprechen. Let me speak."
And 2 shots are fired into his head. And that was the end of Herbert Cukurs. Agents in underpants, covered in blood, looking down at the Hangman of Riga. He was gone.
The plan to incapacitate Cukurs and read aloud the judgment against him was abandoned in the struggle.
They had prepared in advance a huge trunk.
He was put in the box.
They attach a note to his blood-stained body saying, considering the gravity of the crimes of which Herbert Cukurs is accused, notably his personal responsibility in the murder of 30,000 men, women, and children, and considering the terrible cruelty shown by Herbert Cukurs, is carried out his crimes, we condemn the said Cukurs to death. He was executed on 23rd February 1965 by those who will never forget. He dressed up, and each one went his own way according to plan.
And then they all make their way back to Paris. The job is done.
Back in Paris, the Mossad team needs to get word out that Herbert Cukurs has been executed.
We contacted paper agencies in Uruguay to tell them that the body of this gruesome murderer will be found in a house in Montevideo.
He called a newspaper in Paraguay. The telephone call to the agency was received by a junior editor, never paid any attention to it. And the people in the Mossad are waiting 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Nothing happens.
No one believes that this has happened. And in the meantime, Cukurs' family are starting to get a little bit worried about what's happened to their loved one.
This is the first time Herbert Cukurs' son has spoken on television.
For the first few days, we thought everything was normal. Then, after a few days, that's when we began to worry.
So then somebody called up another agency in Montevideo and gave them full details. And this time, one of the editors decided this is serious enough, and he called the police.
12 days after the execution, Montevideo police find the maggot-ridden body in the trunk inside the house on Cartagena Street.
The policeman opened the trunk, and there was Cukurs' body. It had bloated. It was an absolutely vile thing to look at.
A thumbprint from the body matches the print on Cukurs' passport. As intended, the news travels like wildfire.
I was listening to the radio and heard they found a body in Uruguay. I caught this terrible feeling.
A wave of anti-Semitism breaks out.
Synagogues were burnt down in both Uruguay and in Sao Paulo. There were lots of random acts of low-level violence, but there wasn't any sort of massive reprisal carried out.
It seems Israel's message is heard loud and clear. 4 days after the body is found, the German government reacts. They extend the deadline on prosecuting Nazi war criminals. But in Montevideo, police have a homicide to solve.
The family showed pictures of Kunzle to the world's media.
We gave them the picture that was taken at the airport. It was all we had.
But it was too late. Interpol were called in to try and find out who this Anton Kunzle was. But of course, he retreated back to the anonymity of being a Mossad agent in some town in the middle of Israel.
The case goes cold. It would be 20 years before the Mossad admits responsibility for assassinating Herbert Cukurs.
I was very proud of the Israelis for doing that. Even though it was horrible, I thought he deserved it. You must always remember, we must never forget.
Despite testimony from witnesses like Sasha Semenov, Herbert Cukurs' family denies he committed atrocities against Latvian Jews.
We have been waiting 60 years for some kind of proof against my father. If the world can't show any documents that prove his guilt, then declare him innocent. My family has been suffering their entire life because of these lies.
To this day, the man responsible for Herbert Cukurs' death has never revealed his true identity.
Anton Kunzle came back to Israel. Of course, his mustache was shaven off, glasses thrown away. He continued to work for many years in the Mossad.
They got their man, they did it efficiently. Morally it's problematic, but it is nevertheless brilliantly done. So it was, in many ways, the perfect mission.
I am very satisfied. It was never dull in a moment.